What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we're going to do something fun. I like to call this my Back to the Future draft. The thought process here was I've often wondered, if you were able to look into the future just to destroy your friends in your fantasy league, what kind of a team would you draft if you knew the results before they came? Now, obviously that would make this sport very easy and you would completely crush your league mates, but it's not just as simple as picking the players that had the most points scored. It's really looking back over the season and say, okay, who had the most points scored throughout the season, but who did well enough in the playoffs? So you have to have a roster kind of constructed for players that did well over the course of the season, but also ones that finished the season strong. And while, this definitely won't help too much for the next season, it's really good to kind of have that mindset too of thinking through what it's actually like to construct a fantasy team. Is it's more than just getting the players that do well at the beginning. It's about having a team that finishes strong. So if we knew all that, we're able to look and you had a phone that had, an app like ESPN where you could see the score sheet of every single team, every game before you drafted, what would your team look like? Who would you want to draft? So let's go through this, just kind of a fun exercise and see what that team would look like, and then calculate how many points we'd score in both the season and during the championship week. So we're doing a 12 team. This is a PPR draft. I picked the 6th slot. We'll just go from there, and let's see how this looks. So obviously this is based on ADP from before the season started. So we're going to get a lot of, things that nowadays wouldn't make sense. Like obviously DeAndre Hopkins and Devante Adams going so early. And you can still see like David Johnson was ranked number 8. So I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on at the beginning of the year that doesn't make sense now, but that's typical in a fantasy season. So obviously here we're going to go with Michael Thomas. He finished significantly ahead of every other receiver. Since Christian McCaffrey is already taken, we're going to go with the next best option at having the best player in a position. Guessing that Travis Kelce won't make it back to us, which will make our second pick a little bit more interesting. Yep, there's Travis Kelce. He's gone. Dalvin Cook is gone, which Dalvin Cook is an interesting one too, because a lot of people would take him, and I probably would too, even if I knew that he wasn't going to do well for us in the playoffs. But obviously that didn't end up working out for us here. So we are looking at, again, knowing the future, we could take a player here that we know is going to get hurt towards the end of the season because of how well they did. So I think that's what I'm going to end up doing with Mike Evans, but let's see what else we have here. We could, jump the gun and grab an Aaron Jones now, but I think we can get him in the 3rd round just based on his ADP. But then if we do that, we could also get Derrick Henry, which, knowing that we can get Chris Godwin in the 4th, I think let's do that. So we'll just make sure we get Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, the number 2 running back on the season, and he finished number 4 running back in the playoffs. So very, very strong play there. So we start off with Michael Thomas and Aaron Jones, and now we get to swing back. And even though he won't help us in the final week of the season, we can grab Derrick Henry here because we know that Derrick Henry just absolutely dominated. 7th running back on the season, did really well up into the playoffs, but we can grab some more depth later. I'm not too concerned about the injury that he sustained in week 16. We can still make sure we have a pretty strong running back core. What's really nice about this too, if this was for real, is you don't actually have to draft a ton of depth for the running back position because running backs are pretty consistent. The hardest thing about running backs before the year is they get hurt so often that's why you have to draft so many running backs. So really this kind of changes our strategy here, is we're less concerned about drafting a plethora of running backs. We really only need a couple. We just need ones that stay healthy the whole year. So obviously here we already mentioned why we didn't go with Mike Evans. This was a real strategy that some people took, and it paid dividends because Chris Godwin was fantastic up through week 15. Obviously he and Derrick Henry aren't going to help us in the championship game, so we're going to have to make sure that we pivot here in the next couple rounds. But still, if you were able to start with Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, and Chris Godwin, your team would be just absolutely lit. And then we'll top it all off with the steal of the draft, really, in my opinion, at least from the running back spot, was Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler finished 4th on the season with 291 fantasy points. Drafted around the 5th, 6th round. We'll make sure to take him here. There's no reason to shy away from that one. That's a pretty easy call. So now we have a pretty solid core of running backs that will help us to the fantasy playoffs, and then Aaron Jones and Austin Ekeler both. Well, Aaron Jones had a really good championship game. We'll probably grab Kenyan Drake in the next round, but I think we need a receiver here. So looks like DJ Moore is gone, sadly. I think Allen Robinson, even though, again, this is another one of those, he didn't do too great in the championship week. He had a really, very silent, great season. He was number 7 on the year and number 8 in the playoffs in total. He just had a bad championship week, which is unfortunate for a lot of people, but there's enough depth at the wide receiver spot to worry about that later. But as we said, we need to make sure that we grab Kenyan Drake here because of that explosion that he has in the playoffs, the 4-touchdown game, and then he also carried it forward into the championship week and made sure to give us a phenomenal finish to the season. So we want to make sure that we keep Kenny Drake on our team. And then the pick is pretty obvious here. If you guys haven't seen this coming, it's going to be Lamar Jackson. Like, head and shoulders best quarterback on the season for fantasy purposes. Pretty much any league format that you had, Lamar Jackson just absolutely killed it. So, I mean, looking back at our team right now, if you had drafted a team like this, my goodness, Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson as your receiver. You have Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, Austin Ekeler, and Kenyan Drake as your running backs, and then Lamar Jackson. I mean, let's just double up right here. We'll go with Lamar Jackson's favorite target. We'll get one of the best tight ends on the season in Mark Andrews. And now we have a tremendously dominant team already. But let's run this back. So now we know we have the running backs that we need for the playoffs. We're doing the format that we're doing here is a quarterback. As you can see, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 flex, and then a defense. I'm not really too worried about the defense, even knowing everything that has happened with the season. The Patriots started out really strong, so we'll try to grab them at the end if we can, but they didn't give us enough of a benefit towards the end of the season to really matter. Streaming defenses is always going to be your best option, even if you know the results beforehand. So since we have all of our running backs pretty much filled out, we're going to need to try to make up for the Chris Godwin and Allen Robinson duds. So we're just going to draft a lot of high-performing receivers that really came on as the season went on. We're just going to make sure we go ahead and get him. I'm going to draft Devante Parker right here because I took forever, but finally had his breakout season this year. I mean, just absolutely dominant the second half of the season ever since they benched Josh Rosen and got Ryan Fitzpatrick involved. We'll take a few more wide receivers here just for the fun of it. We want to make sure we have A.J. Brown. John Brown is here too. Why don't we pick up John Brown and we'll grab A.J. Brown in the next round. John Brown also very silently had a very strong season. Ended the year pretty well too, so just one of the more solid week in, week out guys. But A.J. Brown with that phenomenal finish to the season, definitely have to make sure we grab him here. Whoops, I'm messing up. All right, so now we have a very, very, very strong receiver core. Like I said, we don't really care about having more than 4 running backs because we know that Aaron Jones and Austin Ekeler and Kenyan Drake all play well towards the end of the season. And then with the exception of week 16, Derrick Henry gets it done. So we don't really need any more depth there. Since we have the opportunity to do so, I think we just take the Patriots defense here. If they're there, yep, we'll take the Patriots defense and get that benefit too. We'll have to pivot off towards the end of the season. Obviously this isn't real, but yes, if we had to pivot off towards the end of the season, that's not a problem because the rest of our team is so freaking solid. Why don't we finish this up? Oh, Deebo Samuel went right before. Darn it. I was going to try to grab him too. We don't really need him. It would have just been like a nice luxury pick. Why don't we go ahead and just grab a nice backup quarterback here. I think Ryan Tannehill was playing well by the time Lamar Jackson was on bye, so we'll just grab Ryan Tannehill here. And let's see what we can get at tight end. Yep, Darren Waller still here. We'll go ahead and take Darren Waller, who also finished on the season very strong. So again, if you knew the results before, you could pivot between Darren Waller and Mark Andrews the few weeks that Mark Andrews had a down game. But I mean, geez Louise, So that's basically the way you would approach it. So obviously Michael Thomas was good the whole season. Aaron Jones had his ups and downs, but he finished the season very strong. Derrick Henry didn't finish the season strong, but he played well up into the championship week, so we'd be able to pivot off of him onto Kenyan Drake, who finished the season strong. Chris Godwin was great up until the point he got hurt. Austin Ekeler was pretty solid all year round. Allen Robinson, same thing, solid up until the very last week, but Lamar Jackson is going to get it done for us. Mark Andrews, I think, was the tight end 4 on the year. Darren Waller also had some tremendous games. So, this would just be lights out. You don't need to perform any waiver wire picks. You don't need to make any trades. Your team is just absolutely stacked in and out. And it's hilarious, too, because, now it's obvious that this team is great. But had you drafted this team before the start of the season, people would have laughed at you for taking Michael Thomas over Julio Jones. People would have laughed at you taking Aaron Jones over Joe Mixon or Leonard Fournette or Kerryon Johnson or Josh Jacobs. Derrick Henry was like a 4th-round pick, so people were drafting Chris Carson, Devonta Freeman over him. Chris Godwin, we got him right about where his ADP was, but really he should have been in the 2nd round. So, this just is a nice little exercise to go to show, you can't just draft. You can't just make a draft and then just be done with your team unless you get this tremendously lucky. Because the only way for you to have a team that's solid enough to win you a championship is if you make perfect picks like this, which I'd love to be able to say that you could, but there's just so much conventional wisdom that gets thrown out the door once people start getting hurt or just things that happen that nobody expected. So for you to actually make a draft like this would be pretty near impossible unless you knew the future beforehand. So I guess kind of the exercise that we're going through here is if you could make a draft like this, then you could make millions of dollars, but the point is you're most likely not going to. So if you want to build a team like this isn't actually, when you look at the players and look at the names, even if you didn't draft this well, you totally could have built a team with the vast majority of these guys, because if you remember, Michael Thomas started the season off really slow, so you could have traded for Michael Thomas. Same thing for Aaron Jones. He had a horrible week 1. You could have traded for him right away. Derrick Henry had a few down weeks. Chris Godwin blew up right away, so you probably wouldn't have ever been able to trade for him. But Austin Ekeler, nobody believed in, so I know I even traded him in a league. So all of these guys you could have traded for, with the exception of Lamar Jackson or Chris Godwin. But those guys, we got them at their ADPs, so you could have easily ended up with them. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, going through this exercise should really help you guys show, even if you have a bad draft, you can still end up with a team this dominant if you act quickly and know the right information to act on. So, when you know a player of a high caliber, like Michael Thomas or Aaron Jones, or even Allen Robinson when he had a few down weeks. If you know a player of that caliber starts off the season poorly, don't give up on them and find the person that is giving up on them and go trade for them. And then obviously the back end of our draft was just filled with waiver wire pickups. Devante Parker, AJ Brown, John Brown in some leagues was on waivers. Darren Waller was on the waiver to start the season. Ryan Tannehill, guys like that saved your season towards the end. So you really have to stay locked in throughout the whole year if you want to make sure that you can have that absolute smash mouth dominant team at the end of the year. You really can't ever phone it in. So that's kind of what we're going to try to do to help you guys throughout this next season, is do more than just help you before the draft. We want to help you the whole season long, because I know things get really busy and it can get very difficult to actually stay up to date and make all the wise decisions that you want to make, because life happens. So let us help you make those quicker decisions and get you a team that looks maybe not this good, but pretty close. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. We're going to do one more thing. I'm going to quickly calculate, just for the heck of it, how many points you would have scored over the course of the fantasy season with this team, and also how many points you would have scored in the championship, just for the heck of it. So give me a second to do that. All right, so with this team, again, we had 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flex, and a defense. I'm running back real quick. We have Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, Chris Godwin, Austin Ekeler, Allen Robinson, Kenyan Drake, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Devante Parker, John Brown, AJ Brown, New England Patriots defense, Ryan Tannehill, and Darren Waller. So on the season, just looking at our main starters, if we took everything else out and the only thing that we were looking at was our main starters, I mean, we'd already have a tremendous head start having Michael Thomas and Lamar Jackson. Like, just Chris Godwin had such a phenomenal season. Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, we'd have all those blow-up games. Even if we just started like our main starters, we would have ended up with over 25. We had 2,590 points on the season, which is absolutely phenomenal. Most years in a PPR league, if you can even exceed 2,000, that's fantastic. And then in the championship week, the most important week, because we have that blow-up game from Kenyan Drake, we have Mark Andrews blow-up game, Lamar Jackson doing well, AJ Brown doing well, Devante Parker doing well. Even if the Patriots defense only scoring 5 points, like if we didn't pick up another defense, we still would have scored 204.4 fantasy points in a standard PPR league with just this team. So that is how you do it. If you're able to go back in time, if anyone ever figures this out, don't tell anyone, because you'd have the easiest time beating your friends in fantasy, and obviously be able to make a lot of money in daily, but that's never going to happen. But it's a fun exercise to go through, and hopefully we learned something from this too, that just because the draft is so much fun and there's so much that's poured into it, like a team like this, even though now on its face looks ridiculous, it wouldn't have been that hard to build if we were able to, piece together a few good trades and a few good waiver wire pickups. That's how you win leagues. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I thought this was tons of fun. So we'll continue to give you guys some off-season analysis, helping you guys get ready for this draft, and then getting you guys prepared to be able to make the moves to make your team look something like this. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll see you in the next video.